So let's first look at count-controlled or definite loops. A count-controlled loop is a loop that executes a specific number of times. You use the count-controlled or definite loop when you know you're 100% sure that you know exactly how many times to repeat a particular algorithm. Let's look at an example of a count-controlled loop. This one's written in English, not Python. And it says we're going to repeat this 5 times. And then what are we going to repeat? We're going to repeat this part down here that's indented, get a quiz score as input from the user. So you can see that from the algorithm, you can tell exactly how many times we'll be repeating this loop body. We want to repeat it 5 times. It says it right in the loop instruction. And the same thing is going to be true when we write it in Python. Let's look at the Python syntax for capturing this repetition idea in our programs. So writing a loop actually involves several different steps. Every loop has an initialization step, a loop condition that tests to see if we should keep going or if it's time to stop. Then it also has a loop body that represents the algorithm that we want to repeatedly apply. And then finally, it always needs an update step at the end of the loop that updates the value of variables so that we are continuing to move forward in our algorithm. We're capturing the fact that we're continuing to process information and we're changing data values. In Python, those steps are arranged like this. We start with the initialization step. And for a count-controlled loop, we know we want to execute this a specific number of times. So part of our loop control is going to be a counter that we use to keep track of how many times have we executed the algorithm so far. And usually that's 0. If we're initializing the loop counter, almost always we set the loop counter to be 0, meaning we haven't started the algorithm yet. And that's called the initialization step for the loop. The next part of the syntax is the while syntax. This is the part that tells Python that you're going to be applying a repetition idea. So when it sees the reserved word while, Python knows this is going to be a loop. Then inside these parentheses that go with our while statement, we're going to list a Boolean expression that tells the computer, I want to keep going while this Boolean expression evaluates to true. When we're writing a count-controlled loop, the expression is always going to be comparing the number of times we've executed the algorithm so far to a maximum value. And we'll see what that looks like in an example in just a minute. So we have a while statement here. It's the reserved word while followed by a Boolean expression that has to be true when you want to keep going and continue to execute the algorithm. Then all the statements that go inside the loop body have to be indented. Remember, anytime in Python that you have one of these little colons, that means there's going to be more stuff that goes with this statement, and I'm going to indent everything that goes with that statement. The loop body is just the piece of code that captures the algorithm that you want to apply. So that could be one statement. It could be lots of different instructions. It just depends on what your goals are that you're trying to capture in your algorithm. And then the final step inside the loop body is always an update step where you update the counter for a count-controlled loop to say, hey, I remember that I've executed this algorithm one additional time now, so make sure you remember that. After the loop terminates, you're welcome to include any additional statements that always need to be executed lined up under the W in the while. That means they're not part of the loop body, they won't be repeated, but they should execute after the loop ends. If you're thinking of this in terms of kind of visualizing what this looks like in code, let me make this a little bit bigger so we can see it better. What's happening when you execute a while statement? You're moving on with your program, and you would do the initialization step outside the loop, right? That happens before the while statement is encountered. And so that would happen up here where this arrow is. And then this part that says expression, that's what happens when you encounter the while statement. And we know the while statement has a Boolean expression that goes with it, and the expression can either be true or it could be false. If the expression evaluates to true, we want to execute all the different statements in the loop body, and then we always go back around and test that loop condition again. And we keep repeating that process. You see how it can make a loop here? It's just like repeatedly over and over and over again, going in a circle until eventually you'll evaluate this expression and its answer will not be true. It'll be false. When the answer is false, it skips over the entire loop body and continues on with any statements that follow the loop, anything that's not indented down here at the bottom. So it's just a little visualization of what's happening as a loop is processed.